actually being available for any kind of work, was excluded to the Chinese Americans until the war came, when they had to have some of these folks work because of the war effort and then gone. Or who can forget the 250,000 Filipinos who went to war and never received compensation for that war until like 2 months ago, when Obama put in the stimulus packages. There are 18,000 Filipino soldiers still left. They're at least in their 80s and 90s. They're going to receive still a pittance. But finally, after that many years of struggle, they're going to receive some recognition from this government. They struggled on since that time, and so I would say to you that part of Asian American studies rests with that. Now, we can't talk just about World War II. Many first-year Asian American students know that discrimination and racism that the Asian and Pacific Islanders faced came way before World War II. We were not passive bystanders to this ill treatment, yet World War II, so if you remember your early history, as we all do, from not only the railroads, but the alien laws and all of that, those were very important struggles of our people and beginnings of confrontation with the powers to be. But World War II was a period that marked an acceleration of our national movement, and civil rights became something that became more palatable and began to feel a change. So the end of World War II, the return to the GIs, the return to some examination of what freedom was about for all of us, became accelerated after that war. So without digging too deeply into my little amateur historical analysis, I think social activists and those of us in Asian American studies have to really remember the post-World War II civil rights movement. We have to remember Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, which said that schools needed to be desegregated, or the Voting Rights Act, or school desegregation, or desegregation of public accommodations, or the anti-war movement. All of these were the beginnings of the activism and community participation that all of us so cherish today. Higher education, those of us in universities, actually we came very, very late to this game. Conflicts to desegregate public schools and public accommodations came well before the age of American universities and colleges began to creep open. While Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat at the front of the colored section of the bus in 1955, most of higher education was white and male. This room would have been very different in those early days. While 9 black students were trying to integrate Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957, neither affirmative action for faculty or students or ethnic studies were even a dream in the minds of American higher education. American higher education was really backwards during that period of time and had no interest in integrating or becoming more aware of what was going on all around them. It was in 1961 when President Kennedy introduced the concept of affirmative action as a method of redressing discrimination, and also developed the Committee on Equal Opportunity, Employment Opportunity, which now is known as the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So this is like the 1960s, you know. The 1964 was the passage of the Civil Rights Act, where finally somebody said they had to desegregate public elementary schools, secondary schools, universities, or you would lose your federal funding. Well, that woke up universities. Well, and I'm not sure they would have woken up had the federal government said that they either desegregated or they lose their federal funding. Now, for most of you, 1964, 65 is a long, ancient history. It's back when the pyramids were built, and the Great Wall of China was built, and just after dinosaurs left the earth. So I know that 65 is like way long time ago. Your parents might not even be born. I can't calculate that part. the moment in my life when I was a junior in high school, applying for college. In those days, I want you to realize how different it is and what a difference Asian American studies has made in our lives. When I was in high school, junior, looking to go to college, there wasn't anything called recruiting of minority students, and nobody really came and said, you know, we really have this wonderful program for students of color and scholarships and EOP and all that sort of. College recruiters bypassed us. They bypassed all of us. They were looking for basically white males. Most of the universities were white males, but some white females were getting into schools. But trust me, none of your parents were recruited heavily for college. It just wasn't in the mindset. It wasn't part of the scheme of things. Diversity wasn't a thought. It wasn't even a word that people used. Further, not only were no college-bound programs developed to help students of color prepare for school, but few people were concerned about the huge dropout rates among students of color. We had nowhere to go. Might as well drop out of school, go to work, get ready to help our families everywhere. And this had to do with Asian Americans, African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans. Bilingual education. It wasn't even discovered by educators yet. If you were limited English speaking in the early 1960s, you went to the sink and swim school of bilingual education. They just threw you in and you did the best you can. In those days, there were stories. And I have to tell you, I know it sounds ridiculous now, but there were stories that are absolutely true where they would take your mouth closed if you spoke a language other than English in the classroom. Because you were going to learn English no matter what. There was no such thing as cultural preservation and things that we so cherish or take for granted today. We humiliated children on a daily basis to rid themselves of their non-whiteness because we were going to make kids just as bland as we possibly could. In those days, when I was a kid, Ching Chong Chinaman was a common phrase that people would hear on the streets as you walk down. Or the thing that I really remember is elementary school. I'll take off my glasses and do that. I never really got this when I was a kid, but they would go like this. They'd go, Chinese, Japanese, Americanese. This as a kid, you know, and I went home one day and I said to my parents, what does that mean? You know, it's Chinese, Japanese, Americanese. I never got it for years, I have to tell you. But it was the climate. It was just commonplace. It wasn't thought to be disrespectful. It wasn't thought to be anything insulting. It just was the way kids treated each other and the way schools demanded. Schools allowed the treatment to go on. It wasn't thought of as a very a problem. It was very late in my career still that oftentimes I would give speeches like this. It hasn't happened, frankly, recently. But up until the time I came to CSUN in the 90s, I would give a speech like this, and invariably somebody would come up to me and say something that I know my students have heard before. Why, you really speak English really well. And they go, where did you learn your English? And of course they thought I was foreign-born, so when I told them, Oakland, you know, but we tell these stories as history, but they're not history. They were a product of an environment that many of us sought to change, to challenge, to interrogate, to look at more carefully. I remember my high school counselor telling me that my best possibility was to go to community college so I could come back and run my father's grocery store. That was the aspiration for us, and I can tell you I wasn't into that. In 1966, when I entered college, there was no ethnic studies. There were no programs. When we went to our history classes or our sociology classes, for those of you who are students now, it's not believable what kind of classes they were. All we taught was truly about dead white men and history of the dominant culture. No voice for us, no regard for that. It wasn't that that wasn't important history. Frankly, it is important history to know about dead white men. It's